Hey everyone, I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on the next terrifying upload. It really helps the channel grow and lets me keep bringing you more of the content you love. I never thought a Tinder date could leave me haunted, but here I am, shaking like a leaf, still not sure what the hell happened that night. It all started when I matched with this girl, Elena, a few days ago. Her pictures weren't anything out of the ordinary, just a cute girl with a few travel pics, one at a concert, and another with her friends at a bar. Nothing screamed too good to be true, but something about her smile made me want to take a shot. We texted back and forth for a couple of days, nothing too deep, just casual stuff. She seemed cool, laid back, like someone I could chill with. One night, she asked if I wanted to grab a drink. I was hesitant at first, but I figured, why not? It was a Saturday, and I had nothing else planned. She suggested we meet at this dive bar downtown. It was nothing fancy, just some dark little spot with bad lighting and even worse music, but it had a certain charm to it, the kind of place you go when you're not looking to impress anyone. When I walked in, I saw her right away. She was sitting in a booth, sipping on something that looked like whiskey, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She waved at me when I came in, and I swear, she had this energy about her that made me feel at ease instantly. It's rare to find someone that real on a dating app, right? We chatted for a while, mostly about random stuff. The usual work, where we grew up, bad dates we'd been on. The conversation was easy, and before long, we were laughing like we'd known each other for years. It felt natural, too natural. I won't lie, I was enjoying myself. I wasn't thinking too much about what came next, but eventually the conversation slowed down. The drinks were going down a little too smoothly, and I could tell she was getting tired. It was one of those nights where the hours seemed to slip away without you even noticing. Around midnight, she suggested heading back to my place. I mean, I didn't expect anything crazy to happen, but she was cute, and the vibe between us was undeniable. So, I agreed. I lived in a small apartment about 15 minutes away, tucked into a quieter part of town. Nothing fancy. A decent place for someone like me who didn't want to spend a fortune on rent, but still wanted a little space. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked. I figured we could hang out a little longer, maybe watch a movie or something before calling it a night. When we got to my place, she kicked off her shoes and flopped onto the couch, kicking back like she'd been here 100 times before. It felt so damn casual. She started talking about her favorite shows, and I couldn't help but zone out a little. I was just tired. The whole night had been pretty chill, and I was looking forward to crashing. I don't even remember how it happened, but before I knew it, we were both in my bed. I know. That part's probably where I should have slowed down. But I didn't. And before I fell asleep, I could have sworn I felt her hand on mine. Her fingers brushed mine lightly, and it felt comforting. I don't know. I just didn't think too much about it. I mean, I'd been drinking too, so my head was a little foggy. Then I drifted off. I woke up the next morning with the sun creeping in through the blinds. The room was still dark in that early morning way, and I felt like crap, head spinning, stomach off, just one of those mornings where you wake up and need a few minutes to figure out what's going on. My first thought? Elena. She wasn't in the bed next to me. I sat up, confused, trying to figure out where she had gone. Maybe she was in the kitchen or on the couch, but the place was quiet. Too quiet. I could barely remember the details of the night before, but I knew she was there with me when I fell asleep. So, where was she now? I got out of bed and rubbed my eyes, the room still spinning a bit. But then, that's when I noticed something weird. There were footprints on the floor. Bloody footprints. I froze. My heart stopped for a second, and my body went rigid. There were red streaks on the hardwood floor, leading from the side of the bed toward the closet. The prints were fresh, still wet even. I couldn't make sense of it at first, but I had to see where they led. Maybe I was just imagining things. Maybe it was something else. I don't know. But I followed them. The footprints led to my closet door, and my breath caught in my chest. I don't know why, but I felt a chill run down my spine. It was like something wasn't right, but I couldn't put my finger on it. My head was still foggy, and I was trying to figure out if I was still dreaming. I had to check. I took a step forward, my feet sticking to the floor with each step, the blood still fresh, trailing behind me. The sound of my own footsteps was deafening in the silence of the room. I reached the closet door and hesitated. I wanted to open it, but I didn't know if I was ready for what I might find. My gut was screaming at me to stop, but my legs moved anyway. I gripped the handle and pulled it open slowly. Nothing. The closet was empty. There was no sign of Elena, no blood, no clue about what had happened. Just the usual mess of old jackets and shoes, nothing more. It was like she had never been there at all. I stood there, staring into the dark closet for a few moments, trying to make sense of it all. I thought maybe I was just being paranoid. Maybe I was still half asleep. But the blood was real. The footprints were real. There was no way this was just my imagination. I looked around the room again, trying to find something, anything, that made sense of it. But there was nothing. No sign of her anywhere. No sign of anyone, really. The apartment was eerily quiet, like something was missing. The air felt heavier, like it was holding something in it that I couldn't quite understand. After a while, I decided to call her. I mean, she had to have left, right? Maybe she was just in a hurry, or maybe she got spooked. I dialed her number, but it went straight to voicemail. I called again. Same thing. Then I texted her. No reply. I don't know why, but I started pacing around the apartment. The room felt small. I felt trapped. The whole place seemed to close in on me. That's when I noticed something else. The footprints, they were still there. I hadn't imagined them. But as I looked closer, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The prints didn't lead out of the room. They didn't lead anywhere else. They just stopped, right at the closet. And that's when it hit me. Something was off. I don't know how to explain it, but I could feel it deep in my bones. There was a presence in that room. Something that shouldn't have been there. Something that had been there before I even woke up. I spent the rest of the day trying to piece together what had happened. I checked my phone for messages. Nothing. No calls, no texts. No sign of her anywhere. I even tried to Google her name. But it was like she had vanished. No social media, no records, nothing. The weirdest part was that after that night, my apartment began to feel different. It wasn't just the unsettling memory of what had happened. It was the little things. The lights flickered more often. Objects would be out of place when I'd come home, even though I was sure I'd put them somewhere else. But the worst part? I started hearing noises. At first, it was just soft scratching sounds from behind the walls, like nails on wood. It would happen at night, just as I was about to drift off to sleep. Then it became more distinct. Footsteps, someone pacing outside my door. I knew it couldn't be my mind playing tricks on me. I wasn't crazy. The noises were real. And the feeling of being watched, that was real too. Then, a few weeks after that night, something happened that made my stomach turn. I had been spending more time out of the apartment, trying to avoid thinking about what happened. I got a text one evening. It was from Elena. My heart skipped when I saw her name pop up, but the message was short and to the point. Come to the park. I need to talk. I didn't know what to think. Part of me was terrified to go. I mean, what was going on? But another part of me wanted answers. I had to know. I replied, agreeing to meet her, even though I had no idea what I was walking into. I arrived at the park, feeling uneasy. It was dark, and there wasn't a single person in sight. I texted her when I got there, but there was no response. Then out of nowhere I heard it. The footsteps again. The same slow, deliberate pace that I'd heard at my apartment. I spun around, my heart hammering in my chest. I couldn't see anyone, but I could hear them, closer and closer, as if whoever it was getting closer to me. Then, from the darkness, I saw a figure. It was her, Elena. But something wasn't right. She was walking toward me, but her face was wrong. There was no expression, no emotion at all. Her eyes were hollow, like she was staring right through me. She stopped a few feet away, and I froze, unable to move. "Why did you leave?" she asked, her voice low and almost mechanical. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. I was too scared to even speak, and just like that, she vanished. I haven't heard from her since. No texts, no calls, nothing. That night, I went back to my apartment for the first time in weeks. The place felt emptier than ever, cold, but one thing was different, the closet. The door was slightly ajar, and I could see something inside. I didn't open it. I couldn't. I don't know what happened to Elena. I don't know where she went, or what she was trying to tell me. All I know is that ever since that night, the footsteps haven't stopped, and they're getting closer. I had just gotten out of a long-term relationship, and after a period of reflection, I decided I was ready to get back out there. My friend Kim had been encouraging me for weeks to give online dating a try. She told me Tinder would be a great way to meet new people casually and without pressure. At first, I was skeptical, unsure about diving into the world of swipe culture. But after some persuasion, I finally decided to give it a shot. I created a profile, posted a few pictures, and started swiping. For the first few days, the whole experience felt like a whirlwind of small talk, awkward introductions, and unsuccessful matches. Each conversation felt shallow, and I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe online dating just wasn't for me. But then, something changed. Brad's profile appeared on my screen. His photos showed a handsome, dark-haired man with striking, kind eyes and a smile that could light up the room. His bio mentioned his love for obscure bands and books, so many of the same ones I cherished. It seemed almost too good to be true. The connection was undeniable, so I decided to super like him, hoping he'd notice me. To my surprise, we matched right away, and within minutes he messaged me. From the very start, Brad was different. He wasn't just sending one-liners like the other guys. He asked thoughtful questions about my day, showed genuine interest in my work as a graphic designer, and remembered even the smallest details I'd shared. It felt refreshing, and before I knew it, we were chatting non-stop. After a few days of getting to know each other, he asked me out for a drink. I didn't hesitate to say yes. Our first date was at a dimly lit craft cocktail bar, where the atmosphere was cozy and intimate. Brad told me about his recent move to the city after a promotion at his finance job. He had this air of success about him, but despite his accomplishments, he was down to earth and approachable. We hit it off instantly, talking about everything from my dreams of one day starting my own design firm to my family back home. By the end of the night, we were laughing and sharing stories like old friends. He walked me home, and we made plans for a second date. Over the next few weeks, things progressed naturally. We settled into an easy, comfortable routine, picnics in the park, long hikes, and cozy movie nights on the couch. It was exactly what I needed after the emotional roller coaster of my last relationship. Everything felt so right, and by the end of the month, Brad invited me to be his date for a friend's wedding. It was a big step, and I was excited. It felt like we were getting closer, and I was eager to meet his friends and learn more about him. But that night, things took an unexpected turn. As I mingled with Brad's college buddies, I noticed a few things that didn't quite add up. His friends laughed and joked about his wild frat house days, stories that didn't quite line up with the polished, responsible Brad I had come to know. Curiosity got the best of me, and I jokingly asked him about it. Suddenly, his mood shifted. He became distant, his smile faltering for the first time since I'd met him. As the night went on, more discrepancies emerged. Brad introduced me to people as his girlfriend from Chicago, even though I'd never lived there. He casually mentioned his dog, Cooper, who had sadly passed away, but just weeks earlier, he had regaled me with stories of his dog, Dexter. It felt like something wasn't right, but I pushed it aside, chalking it up to a simple misunderstanding. The evening ended with a quick exit, and Brad insisted on walking me home. The whole night, though, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was off. The next week, I decided to subtly bring up the inconsistencies I had noticed, but Brad's responses were evasive at best. He brushed off my questions or got irritated with me. I tried to laugh it off, but my unease only grew. That's when Kim suggested I do some digging, and at first, I was hesitant. But curiosity eventually got the best of me, and I began to search. What I uncovered shook me to my core. Brad had multiple online dating profiles on Tinder, Bumble, and OkCupid. Each profile had subtle but significant differences about where he was from, where he worked, and whether or not he had pets. He was clearly creating a tailored persona for each platform, adjusting his details to fit what he thought each woman would want to hear. It became clear that he wasn't being honest with me or anyone else. It wasn't just the inconsistencies in his stories, it was the realization that he had been manipulating the situation to suit his needs. I confronted Brad over the phone, telling him what I had discovered. His reaction was nothing like I expected. The warm, attentive man I had been talking to vanished in an instant. He began hurling angry insults at me, telling me I had no right to look into his private life. He accused me of being closed-minded and incapable of handling his complex life. I ended the call abruptly, my heart racing as I processed the coldness in his voice. I had never felt so unsettled. But this was just the beginning of my nightmare. Brad's obsession only grew. He somehow obtained my phone number and began bombarding me with texts, some apologizing, begging for another chance, others filled with disturbing threats about what he would do if I tried to leave him. The texts were a roller coaster of emotions, ranging from desperate pleas to violent threats. One day he showed up outside my office building with flowers, asking my coworker where I was. I didn't have any concrete proof it was him, but deep down, I knew. When I changed my number, I thought I could put an end to it. But Brad wasn't so easily deterred. He kept creating new accounts on different platforms, finding new ways to contact me. His messages became more erratic. One minute he would be apologizing profusely. The next he would be raving about how I was the one pushing him away. His obsession was spiraling out of control, and I realized I had to take action. With the help of Kim and a few other close friends, I made sure to block Brad on all platforms and set my social media accounts to private. I notified building security at both my apartment and office to be on the lookout for him. I also filed police reports detailing his disturbing threats and actions. It was a long and harrowing process, but after a few weeks, it seemed like he finally got the message and stopped trying to contact me. Looking back, I can't help but feel a sense of relief that I made it out relatively unscathed. But the experience has left scars, physical and emotional. I allowed someone I didn't know well enough into my life too quickly, dismissing red flags because of loneliness and wishful thinking. I've learned painful but valuable lessons from what happened. Now, I take every precaution when it comes to online dating. I do background checks, pay close attention to inconsistencies, and keep personal details private until I'm absolutely sure someone is who they say they are. And I trust my instincts. If something feels off, I don't make excuses, I walk away. While the memories of that terrifying time still linger in the back of my mind, I'm thankful for the strength I found to move on. Now, I'm passionate about helping other women avoid the same traps. It takes work to stay vigilant, but I'll never risk my safety again. It may be hard, but it beats the alternative. I survived the Tinder horror story, and I'll never let it happen again. It was just another dull Saturday evening when I decided to open up Tinder and see if there were any interesting women in my area who might be looking to chat or meet up. I'd been in a bit of a dating slump lately, with work and other responsibilities occupying most of my time. I'd had some bad experiences before, but I figured that maybe, just maybe, I could match with someone cool who could make my weekend a little more exciting. As I lazily thumbed through profile after profile, I came across one that immediately caught my eye, a stunning brunette named Sarah, with a warm and genuine smile that seemed to leap off the screen. Her photos showed her doing fun, adventurous activities like rock climbing and hiking. It was clear that she was someone who loved the outdoors and had an active lifestyle. Her bio said that she had just moved to the city for a new job and didn't know many locals yet. She mentioned wanting to meet people, so I thought it might be a good opportunity to connect. Her profile felt refreshing. She seemed friendly and down to earth, but also independent and outgoing, someone who was obviously comfortable in her own skin. Her vibe felt inviting, and I found myself intrigued. After debating for a moment, I swiped right, figuring it was worth a shot. To my surprise, we matched almost immediately, and just as quickly, she sent me a message. Our conversation started with some small talk, but it didn't take long for things to flow. We started cracking jokes, exchanging fun facts about ourselves, and discovering that we had a lot in common. She told me that she worked as a graphic designer, which sounded so much cooler than my job as an accountant, but she said she found it impressive. It was a strange feeling when someone made me feel good about my own boring job. As we continued chatting, I could feel the chemistry building. We shared stories about travel, music, and our favorite books. The conversation flowed effortlessly, and before I knew it, an hour had passed. It was one of those rare moments when it felt like you could talk to someone for hours without ever getting bored. Mustering my courage, I asked her if she'd be interested in meeting up for a drink that night. My heart raced as the speech bubbles popped up on my screen, showing that she was typing. When her message finally arrived, I felt a wave of relief. She readily agreed to meet up at a popular local bar. I was ecstatic. Not only was an attractive woman interested in me, but we really seemed to have some serious chemistry. This could be the start of something special. I rushed through my preparations. I showered, shaved, and spent way too long picking out the perfect outfit. I wanted to look nice but casual, like I wasn't trying too hard. After much deliberation, I settled on dark slim jeans and a button-down shirt. I splashed on a little cologne, trying to make a good first impression. When I was finally ready, I couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and nervousness. It felt like a chance at something that could be great. When I arrived at the bar, it was packed with people, the music loud and the air buzzing with energy. I staked out a small high-top table with a good view of the door so I could watch for Sarah to walk in. As I sipped my beer, I tried to calm my nerves. I checked the time on my phone, noticing that it was getting later and later with no sign of her. The minutes seemed to drag on, and I felt that familiar sense of dread creep in. After 30 minutes with no word from Sarah, I had to accept the harsh truth. I had been stood up. It wasn't the first time it had happened, and I wasn't too surprised. Getting ghosted was a common risk with online dating, but I couldn't help feeling disappointed. I had genuinely felt a connection with Sarah. I finished my beer and was preparing to head home when my phone buzzed. I looked down at the screen and froze. It was a message from Sarah. "Help, I'm in trouble." A chill ran down my spine. I immediately felt a wave of panic and concern wash over me. What was happening? The message came in quickly. "Help, I'm in trouble." My heart dropped. Then came a blurry photo of a dimly lit street corner, a place I recognized from earlier. She explained that a group of strange men had started following her after she parked near the bar, and they had chased her for blocks until she managed to duck into an alley. She was whispering that she was trapped and begging me to hurry and come rescue her. Without thinking, I jumped up and rushed out of the bar. I hailed the first cab I saw and showed the driver the blurry photo, telling him to get me to that location as fast as possible. As we drove through a sketchy neighborhood filled with vacant, run-down buildings and narrow back streets, a nagging voice in the back of my mind told me something wasn't right, but I pushed the thought away. All I could think about was getting to Sarah. The cab finally came to a stop at the intersection from the photo. The street was eerily quiet, the street lamps flickering faintly in the darkness. I told the driver to wait as I jumped out, shouting Sarah's name down the alley. My voice echoed, but only cold silence answered back. I took a deep breath and cautiously made my way down the sidewalk, straining my eyes to see anything that might give me a clue as to where she was. Suddenly, I felt a sharp pain erupt at the back of my skull. The world spun and everything went black. When I regained consciousness, everything was blurry and disorienting. My head throbbed with pain, and as my vision slowly cleared, I realized I was lying on a cold concrete floor. The room I was in was small and dingy, lit by a single hanging light bulb that swung slightly overhead. Panic surged through me as I tried to move my arms, but they were tightly bound. My feet were also tied, making any movement impossible. Fear flooded me as I struggled to process what had just happened. I tried to call out, but no sound came out of my mouth. My throat felt dry, and I realized that I had no idea where I was or how I had gotten here. Then, the metal door to the room creaked open, and 3 men walked in, laughing quietly among themselves. My stomach dropped. I recognized them from the blurry photo Sarah had sent me earlier. It all became horrifyingly clear. Her desperate pleas for help had been a setup, part of an... The men were grinning at me as they approached, reeking of cigarettes and alcohol. One of them flashed a switchblade from his jacket pocket, and another cracked his knuckles menacingly. I opened my mouth to beg for mercy, but no words came out. I could only watch helplessly as they closed in on me, feeling more and more trapped with each passing second. They didn't waste any time. One of the men leaned in and whispered something I couldn't fully understand, his voice thick with malice. The other 2 stood back, smirking as they watched. I was powerless, at their mercy, and it became clear that I had fallen into a nightmare. Sarah had never been in danger. I had been the target all along, but by some miracle, I managed to escape that house of horrors later that night when my captors were passed out drunk. I won't go into the details of how I made it out alive. Let's just say it wasn't easy. I left the house with a few scars, physical and emotional, but I had survived. When I finally made it to a safe place, I immediately went to the police and reported the elaborate catfishing scheme. However, the men had disappeared without a trace, leaving only questions behind. Sharing my story now is something I hope will help others avoid the terrifying experience I went through. The truth is, we all want to believe people are inherently good, especially when meeting someone new. But there are predators out there who exploit dating apps to take advantage of the trusting and naive. I learned the hard way that it's important to be cautious, to meet in crowded public places, and to let a friend know where you're going. Your safety is always more important than any first date. In the world of online dating, it's crucial to stay vigilant. You never know what dangers might be lurking behind a friendly smile and a flattering bio. I've certainly learned that the hard way. I still vividly remember the day I matched with him on Tinder. His profile picture showed him proudly rock climbing, muscles flexed. He looked rugged and adventurous. I thought he seemed like the kind of guy who was spontaneous, always up for trying something new. We messaged back and forth for a few weeks. His responses were engaging, and he kept suggesting all these fun places to go to, new restaurants or quirky bars around the city. He seemed outgoing, confident, and exciting, the type of guy I thought would be fun to spend time with. Our first date went really well. We met up for dinner at a trendy Italian restaurant. The conversation flowed smoothly over pasta and wine. He was talkative and made me laugh a lot. It felt natural, easy. I didn't feel any pressure to impress him. When we parted ways, he immediately asked if he could see me again soon. I happily agreed. I had a good feeling about him, even though I didn't know him that well yet. Over the next month, we had several more fun dates around town. He took me dancing, to comedy shows, and even on a hike through a local park. I thought I was getting to know him, but in hindsight, I realized we mostly talked about me, my job, my hobbies, my interests. He never really opened up about his life. There were little glimpses of his background here and there, but it was always vague. He'd change the subject or give short answers when I tried to dig deeper. Then one night, over sushi, he casually brought up the idea of getting out of town for a weekend. He described a charming rustic cabin he knew of a few hours away, out in the woods with no cell service. He painted the picture of a perfect getaway, just the two of us, unplugging from technology and escaping the city for a bit. It sounded like a fun, spontaneous mini-vacation. The thought of being surrounded by nature and spending time away from everything else seemed so appealing. I agreed without thinking twice about going to this remote location with a man I still barely knew. We left early Saturday morning, and as we drove farther outside the city, I started to feel a strange sense of unease. The scenery grew more remote with every passing mile, winding mountain roads that led us deeper into dense forests. At first, I tried to engage him in conversation to pass the time, but he grew unusually quiet and tense. He stopped responding with his usual enthusiasm, only giving terse one-word answers. I thought maybe he was just tired or distracted, but as we turned down a narrow dirt road leading to the cabin, I got this chilling sense that something was very, very wrong. The peaceful isolation was starting to feel claustrophobic. When we arrived at the cabin, my unease deepened. It wasn't the cozy, charming retreat he had described. The place looked like it hadn't been cared for in years. The wood siding was weathered and cracked, and the landscaping was overgrown and wild. Inside, the air was musty, and the place was dark and dilapidated. There was nothing remotely romantic about it, just a dirty mattress on the floor and a few fraying chairs scattered around the room. My heart sank. I tried to hide my discomfort, but it was impossible to ignore how run down everything looked. I glanced at him, but he was acting like everything was fine, almost as if nothing was out of the ordinary. As the sun started to set, the cabin grew even darker, and the sense of isolation became suffocating. It was a strange kind of quiet, one that felt oppressive, like the weight of the forest outside was pressing in on us. I suggested we drive back to town to get some proper supplies, but he sternly insisted that we stay. He seemed different, more forceful, almost too eager for me to stay in this strange, remote place. It was then that I realized just how isolated we were. There was no phone signal, no other houses or signs of civilization for miles in any direction. I had no way to reach anyone if something went wrong. The night took an even darker turn as we settled in. His mood shifted drastically. The light-hearted, charming guy I had spent the past month with was gone. In his place was someone cold, unpredictable, and menacing. He snapped at me over the smallest things, his voice growing sharp with every passing comment. I could tell something was off, but I didn't know what. When he started complaining about a shady deal gone bad, I tried to brush it off. But then he casually mentioned needing leverage to settle it. That's when I started to feel the first stirrings of real fear. As the evening wore on, he talked more about it, mentioning illegal firearms and shady dealings. My stomach dropped. I tried to stay calm, but I realized that this man, this person I had trusted, wasn't who he seemed. The moment he mentioned trafficking firearms, my blood ran cold. I had made a huge mistake. I was alone in the middle of nowhere with a man who could be capable of anything. I had no idea what he could do, but I knew it couldn't be good. I wasn't sure if he was just venting or if he meant what he said, but I could feel that something dangerous was coming. The last thing I wanted was to make him angry, so I tried to keep my distance and stay out of his way. Then, under the guise of needing to use the bathroom outside, I snuck out to try and assess my options. The cold air hit my face like a slap, and the darkness of the woods around me was suffocating. There were no trails, no lights, just thick, tangled trees and silence. It felt like the entire world had swallowed us whole. I stood there frozen, realizing how helpless I was. I was trapped with a man I barely knew, in a place so isolated I couldn't even get a signal to call for help. I crept back inside, my mind racing. As I walked past the bedroom, I overheard him talking on the phone. His voice was low and angry, filled with threats. He was talking to someone, promising leverage, and sounding more like a criminal than the charming guy I had met weeks ago. With a sinking heart, I realized that he had lured me out to this cabin for a purpose I couldn't even begin to fathom. I was meant to be his pawn, an innocent victim in whatever twisted plan he had. The fear that gripped me was overwhelming. I knew I couldn't stay there. I had to get away. I waited until he drank himself into a stupor, barely coherent, before making my move. In the earliest hours of the morning, I gathered my few belongings and stuffed them into a bag. I left the cabin as quietly as I could, not daring to make a sound. The air was cold, the mist from the forest swirling around me as I picked a direction and started running. I had no idea where I was going. The dense forest closed in on me, branches clawing at my skin. It felt like I had been running forever, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't risk being caught. I pushed forward, my breath coming in ragged gasps, my legs burning from the exertion. The woods felt endless, and the more I ran, the more disoriented I became. My mind was racing with thoughts of what would happen if he caught up with me, if I didn't make it out of the forest. Eventually, through the fog and the trees, I saw a glimmer of light. I ran towards it hoping, praying it was something, anything that could help me. It turned out to be a dirt road, cutting through the wilderness like a lifeline. My heart pounded in my chest as I stumbled along it, too exhausted to keep up a fast pace. After what felt like an eternity, I spotted a small ranger station in the distance. My legs gave out as I collapsed in front of it, nearly sobbing with relief. The ranger, an older man with a gruff but kind demeanor, listened to my story with alarm and immediately contacted the authorities. Later, I learned the man I had gone to the cabin with had a lengthy criminal history. He had intentionally lured me out there under false pretenses, planning to use me as leverage for some shady deal gone wrong. I was horrified to think about what could have happened if I hadn't escaped. Since that day, I've become a lot more cautious. I never meet strangers online without doing some research first, and I only agree to dates in public places. I tell a friend where I'll be, and I always keep my drink in sight. Though the experience left me terrified, it also taught me the importance of listening to my intuition. If something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. I eventually met someone wonderful, someone who respects my boundaries and understands my hesitation when it comes to trust. He's patient with me as I move slowly in the relationship. But even now, when I walk alone at night, I still check over my shoulder, haunted by the memory of that night in the woods. I'll never forget the terrifying manipulation I endured. It serves as a constant reminder of the dark side of dating, how easily someone can disguise their true intentions. I've been on and off dating apps for years now, trying to find someone real. Most of the time it's harmless, just swiping through the endless profiles, chatting here and there, and occasionally meeting up for awkward coffee dates or quick dinners. But something happened recently that messed with my head so badly, I can't look at Tinder the same way anymore. It started simple enough, just a regular swipe session on a Tuesday night. But then, it became this twisted game that I couldn't escape, no matter how hard I tried. So here's how it all went down. It was late, I was bored, and I was mindlessly swiping through Tinder. I've been there, scrolling through profiles, sometimes laughing at the cheesy bios, other times just feeling bad for some of the dudes who really seemed to be trying way too hard. I wasn't really expecting anything to happen, just swiping, no big deal. But then I came across a profile that immediately caught my attention. He was good looking, but that wasn't what grabbed me. His eyes were the weird thing. I know, it sounds insane, but they were. Too intense. Like, staring through me kind of intense. And the bio? It was pretty simple. We're meant to be. Okay, I get it. There are a lot of weirdos out there, but that message, it struck me as different. A little off. Still, I swiped right. I mean, what was the worst that could happen, right? A few minutes later, I got a match. Honestly, it didn't even feel like a real match because the profile was so generic. It didn't feel like someone actually took the time to craft a profile. Just a random dude with a decent photo and a message that said, "I knew you'd swipe right." I wasn't really interested. It just felt odd. But I didn't immediately unmatch or block. I just kind of ignored the message and went about my business, thinking it was some dumb glitch in the system or maybe just a bot. But then something even weirder happened. Over the next few days, I kept seeing his profile, again, and again, and again. Every time I opened the app, there he was, somehow popping up on my feed. Different photos this time, with subtle changes, but it was always the same guy, with that same intense stare. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence. Tinder's algorithms can be strange sometimes, right? But after the third or fourth time, it started to get under my skin. I'd swipe left every time, but the profiles would still keep showing up. It wasn't just that his profile was showing up, though. It was the messages that came after. "We're meant to be. You can't escape me. See you tonight." Every time I swiped left, I'd see a new message waiting for me. And honestly, the first time I saw it, I thought maybe I was just going crazy. Or maybe it was some kind of sick joke, right? But no matter what I did, no matter how many times I blocked or unmatched him, it kept happening. I would delete the app, only to have the same messages pop up on my screen the moment I re-downloaded Tinder. I even tried logging out of my account and creating a new one under a completely different name, thinking maybe he was somehow just finding me through a glitch in the system. But nope, there he was again. Profile picture changed, name changed, message the same. We're meant to be. The first time I saw it again, my stomach dropped. I'm not an idiot. I know the internet can be a dark and weird place. I know people can create fake profiles for whatever reasons, whether it's to mess with people or worse, but this wasn't just a fake account. This was personal. The profile felt like it was following me. I started getting the messages no matter what I did. I tried everything. I blocked him, deleted my account, made new ones, even uninstalled the app for a few weeks. But somehow, in some twisted way, I could never fully escape it. One afternoon, I was sitting at my desk at work, scrolling through my phone while I had a few minutes of downtime, and there it was again. The same message from the same guy on a new profile with a different name. See you tonight. By this point, I was beyond freaked out. I felt like I was going crazy. I thought maybe it was just some sick joke, some dude with too much time on his hands messing with me for fun. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just that. It felt wrong. The messages were too consistent, too familiar. It was like he knew exactly when I was going to open the app, like he was somehow always there, always waiting. I told a few friends about it, but they just laughed, brushing it off as some weird coincidence or an overactive imagination. But it wasn't. It wasn't funny. It was real, and it was starting to get to me. I couldn't escape it. It was like this invisible hand that reached into my life and grabbed me whenever I was the most vulnerable. I thought about calling the police, but how could I explain it? How could I even begin to make sense of it? There was no proof, no real contact. Just some creepy messages from an anonymous guy with a disappearing profile that seemed to follow me around. I had no idea what I was dealing with, and that uncertainty gnawed at me every day. After a couple of weeks, I couldn't take it anymore. I deleted Tinder for good. I figured that if I just completely removed myself from the app, I would finally be free of him. But even then, the messages didn't stop. I'd be lying in bed late at night trying to fall asleep, and then my phone would buzz. We're meant to be. It got to the point where I couldn't even sleep without checking my phone, afraid that the message would be there, taunting me from the screen. I'd jump awake in the middle of the night, my heart racing, convinced that the guy was outside my window or following me. I know it sounds dramatic, but that's how it felt. I couldn't shake it. I couldn't escape it. Then one night, while I was out at a bar with friends trying to forget about it all, I had an unsettling feeling. I was talking to a guy at the bar when I glanced up and saw a man standing near the entrance. My heart dropped when I recognized him. It was him, the guy from the profiles, the same eyes, the same look. He was staring directly at me. But there was something about him that made me freeze in place. His eyes weren't just intense anymore. They were cold, empty, like he wasn't even seeing me, just staring right through me. I felt a wave of nausea roll through me, and I excused myself from the conversation. I needed to get out of there fast, but as I walked towards the door, I could feel his gaze burning into my back. My pulse was pounding in my ears and my hands were shaking. I stepped out into the cool night air, but the dread still hung over me. Was he following me? Was he already there, waiting? I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to make it stop. I spent the next few days in a haze, constantly looking over my shoulder, checking my phone, waiting for something, anything, that could explain what was going on. And then, finally, I thought I had found it. I had received a new message, this time not from Tinder, but from a completely unknown number. It was just 2 words, found you. That's when I realized that no matter what I did, no matter how far I ran, this guy, this thing, wasn't going to stop. And maybe it's crazy, but I don't know how to explain it. I didn't want to leave my apartment. I didn't want to go out, didn't want to meet anyone. I kept the blinds closed, kept my phone off, but it didn't matter. I knew this wasn't just a bad dream or some creepy joke anymore. It was real. And it was hunting me. I'll never forget the night I went on that Tinder date. Honestly, I don't even know why I'm sharing this with anyone, but every time I close my eyes, the memory of it keeps coming back. It's something that still messes with my head, and I figured talking about it might get it out of my system. But I doubt it'll ever stop haunting me. It all started like any other normal Tinder date. I had matched with him a few days earlier. His name was Michael, and he seemed like a pretty average guy. His pictures were decent, nothing crazy, just a couple of selfies at the beach, a few group shots with friends, and 1 or 2 of him with a dog. I'm a sucker for dog pictures, so I was already a little intrigued. His messages were friendly enough. Nothing creepy or over the top, just simple conversation about music, travel, and a few of our mutual interests. Our first date was set for a Friday evening. I had to admit, I was a little nervous, but that's pretty normal, right? The plan was to meet at a bar downtown, have a couple of drinks and see how things went. I got ready, picked out a cute outfit, the one that makes you feel just confident enough but not too over the top, and headed out. When I got to the bar, I spotted him right away. He was sitting at a table near the window, wearing a plaid shirt and jeans, looking, well, pretty much like his photos. At first glance, he was exactly what I expected. He stood up to greet me, and he had this easy smile that seemed to put me at ease. We ordered drinks, talked about our jobs, our families, and other normal first date stuff. There was nothing that stood out as particularly alarming or weird, but there was this weird undercurrent to him. It wasn't obvious at first, but it was like he was just too perfect. Like he was doing everything right. Too right. The right amount of eye contact, the right amount of laughter at my jokes, the right amount of personal stories that made me feel like we had a lot in common. As the night wore on, I started to relax. Maybe I was just being paranoid. Maybe I was overthinking things. But something about him was off. He asked me if I wanted to go for a walk after the drinks, and we ended up strolling around the city. It was chilly, but the night air felt nice. The whole evening was fine, just a little too perfect, too smooth. But the weird thing was, he seemed to be paying attention to everything. I'm talking little details, stuff I didn't even think twice about. He asked if I'd ever been to a certain restaurant that I'd mentioned in passing. He asked if I liked a certain band because I'd briefly mentioned them. He seemed to be absorbing every little thing about me without missing a beat. It was almost unsettling. Still, I brushed it off. Maybe I was just being dramatic. We ended the night with a hug and some polite small talk about seeing each other again. Nothing out of the ordinary, right? I went back to my apartment, locked the door, and put my stuff away. Nothing strange happened, or at least, not until later. I woke up at 3 a.m. That's what really got to me, It wasn't the date itself, but what happened afterward. I woke up because I heard something. At first, I thought it was the wind or maybe some noise from the street outside. But then, I heard it again. A click. A soft metallic sound that sent this weird chill down my spine. My brain immediately went to the worst-case scenario. My heart started pounding as I tried to figure out where the sound was coming from. I glanced at my phone. 3:05 a.m. My apartment was completely silent. I told myself it was nothing, just the old building settling or a sound from outside. But then it happened again. The sound of a door unlocking. I sat up in bed, frozen, listening closely. My eyes scanned the room, making sure everything was in its place, but my mind was racing. Was I hearing things? Did I forget to lock the door when I came home? Then, I heard the sound clearly. It was the unmistakable click of my front door unlocking. Slowly, carefully, I got out of bed. My heartbeat was so loud in my ears I could barely hear anything else. I tiptoed toward the door. The living room was dark, but I could see the faint light from the street lamps outside through the window. Everything was still, too still. I quietly moved to the door and put my ear up against it, barely breathing. The sound had stopped, but there was something off. I could feel it. I was sure someone was on the other side. I slowly backed away from the door, my mind racing with thoughts. Who could it be? I didn't know anyone who had a key to my apartment. Or at least, I shouldn't have. I moved quickly, rushing to my phone and unlocking it with shaky hands. My heart was hammering in my chest as I checked the time. 3:08 a.m. My mind was all over the place. I dialed my friend's number, no answer. I called again, still nothing. By this point, I was getting panicked, feeling like my whole body was on high alert. I needed to check the door. I had to know what was going on, but part of me was scared to open it. I grabbed my pepper spray from the counter, just in case. Just a little security, even if it wasn't much. But then, I realized something I hadn't thought of before. The lock, the door had clicked. Someone had the key. Someone knew exactly how to open it. The moment the realization hit me, my stomach dropped, and I felt like I was going to throw up. There was only one person I could think of who could have a spare key to my apartment. Michael. I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't believe it, but something clicked in my head, the way he knew so much about me, how he seemed to be following up on every little detail. I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't some coincidence. He had been too interested, too observant. I didn't know what to do. I stood there, holding my phone, trying to think through my options. My heart felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. I considered calling the police, but I couldn't imagine what I would say. I think the guy I went on a date with is at my door at 3 a.m. I couldn't even fathom how that conversation would go. Then, before I could make another move, the sound came again, the click. My stomach turned over. Someone was unlocking the door. I rushed to the hallway, peering out from the darkness of my bedroom, barely breathing. The front door creaked open slowly, and I saw a figure in the doorway. The figure I knew all too well. It was Michael. He was standing there, a wide grin on his face, holding up a copy of my house key, the metal glinting in the dim light. His eyes were locked on mine, and he just stood there, smiling like it was the most casual thing in the world. I froze. There was nothing I could do but stare. My mind went blank. I couldn't process what was happening. How had he gotten a key? How had he planned this? He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The grin on his face said everything. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode. And then, without another word, he just walked in like he belonged there. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I bolted. I grabbed my phone, ran to the window, and screamed as loud as I could. My neighbors rushed out to help, and soon the police were there. But when they arrived, he was gone. No trace of him anywhere. After that night, I made sure to change all my locks, but every time I hear a door click or someone's key in the lock, I can't help but think of him, standing there with that smile. I've never been the same. I've never felt safe in my own place since then. And honestly, I'm still not sure what the hell his plan was. But I do know one thing. There are some people who will do whatever it takes to get close to you, even if it means going too far. Even if it means showing up at your door in the middle of the night with a key that shouldn't exist. So, I wasn't exactly looking for anything serious when I downloaded Tinder. Honestly, I didn't even know what I was hoping for. I'd been on and off dating apps for months, and every time I thought I'd found a decent guy, something weird would happen. But then I matched with Alex, and for the first time in a while, things felt different. His profile didn't scream red flag the way a lot of the others did. No weirdly posed gym pics, no overly dramatic quotes, just a few chill pictures of him hiking, a couple with friends, and a picture of him holding a dog, which is honestly the easiest way to win me over. He messaged me first, and it was normal stuff, asking about my day, talking about what I like to do for fun. No weird questions, no creepy vibes. I was actually excited to meet up with him. We went for drinks at a little bar downtown. The whole evening was great. We talked about our favorite music, movies, and random stuff like how we both like cheesy horror movies. He had this really nice, easy-going vibe, and I felt comfortable with him. The night flew by, and before I knew it, it was time to leave. We walked out of the bar together, and he offered to walk me home, which I appreciated. It was a cool evening, one of those crisp nights that makes you want to bundle up, but not so cold that you're miserable. We strolled down the street, laughing and talking, and I was surprised at how much I was enjoying his company. Nothing seemed off at all, but then, things got strange. As we neared my apartment building, I noticed Alex started walking a little faster, not in an aggressive or panicked way, just quicker than before. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe he was just eager to say goodbye. But as we got closer to the entrance, I could feel the atmosphere shift. I don't know how to explain it, but it was like the entire world around us got quieter. The city sounds, the cars, the chatter, the streetlights, everything seemed to fade for a second. I chalked it up to the weird way my brain was processing the night. Maybe I was just tired or being overly dramatic. But then it happened. Just as we were a few feet away from the front door, I felt Alex's hand brush against my arm, his steps slowing down as he came closer. I noticed his eyes flickering over my shoulder like he was distracted by something behind me. His face seemed, I don't know, different. Like he was lost in thought, but also a little off. It was then that I felt it. That unmistakable sensation that someone or something was watching us. It was like a presence that had been lingering just out of sight, but now was right there, just behind us. I don't know how I knew, but I could tell something was wrong. My heart started racing, and I instinctively grabbed his arm. I don't even know why I did it. Maybe I was trying to make sure I wasn't just imagining things. But I remember feeling him tense up in a way I hadn't felt before, and that's when it happened. Without warning, Alex stopped in his tracks and looked straight ahead. His jaw tightened, and I could see his muscles stiffen. His hand remained at his side, but there was something off about the way he stood. It was like he was frozen in place, but also listening. I had no idea what was going on, but that's when I grabbed his arm and whispered, "Don't turn around." I was trembling by then, and I couldn't even explain why. I just knew that whatever was behind us wasn't something I wanted to see. The thing is, I didn't even have to look to know something was there. I could feel it, like a shadow. No, not a shadow, more like a presence that was lurking just behind us. I couldn't explain it, but it was suffocating, like it was closing in on us, and the air suddenly felt thicker, heavier. Alex didn't say anything. He just kept standing there, as if he was, waiting for something or someone. But I could see the tension in his posture, the way his shoulders had gone rigid. That's when I realized I wasn't the only one feeling it. We stood there in complete silence for what felt like an eternity. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what was happening, but I couldn't. I wanted to move, to run, to scream, but my feet were frozen to the ground. And then, I swear I heard it. A faint shuffling sound, like footsteps behind us. But when I turned my head, nothing was there. I saw nothing but the empty street behind us, lit by the dim glow of the streetlights. The sound stopped as suddenly as it had started. That's when I knew something was seriously wrong. I started to pull away from Alex, but before I could, he spoke. His voice was barely a whisper, and there was something in it that sent a chill down my spine. "We need to go inside now," he said, not looking at me, his eyes still fixed on the space behind us. I don't know why, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was no ordinary date. I had been so caught up in the chemistry of the night, in the ease of the conversation, that I hadn't noticed how off Alex was. There was something about him that didn't feel right anymore, like a switch had flipped in him. I tried to keep my voice steady as I said, I think I'm okay, I'll be fine." But he just kept staring straight ahead. His hand gripped mine tighter, like he was pulling me closer to him, but also keeping me from looking behind us. "Please," he said, his voice almost pleading now. "Just don't turn around. We need to go inside. Trust me, don't look back." At that moment, it clicked. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was the panic in his voice. Maybe it was the cold fear creeping up my spine. But something told me this wasn't just a strange coincidence. This wasn't just a random feeling. Something had followed him, something that had been lingering behind us for the entire walk. I felt the cold sweat on the back of my neck, and my breath came in shallow gasps. I didn't know what to do or how to react. My instincts were screaming at me to run, to get inside, to lock every door and window and pray that whatever was behind us wouldn't follow. But I couldn't stop staring at Alex, the man I had just spent hours with, laughing, talking about silly things, acting like everything was normal. And yet, here he was, standing there, practically frozen in place, his eyes wide but also alert, like he knew something I didn't. Suddenly, I heard it again, those faint, almost inaudible footsteps. I looked around quickly, but again, there was nothing, just empty streets. I was shaking now, and I could feel every muscle in my body tense up, ready to bolt if I needed to. "Alex," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "What's going on?" He didn't answer. Instead, he jerked his head to the side like he had seen something. His eyes widened, his grip on my arm tightening even more. He started pulling me toward the door to my building, and before I could protest, we were inside. I locked the door behind us and stood there in the hallway, trying to catch my breath. The whole thing felt unreal, like some kind of nightmare I couldn't wake up from. My mind was racing, and I didn't know what to think. Alex didn't say anything after we entered the building. He didn't look at me, didn't even glance at me as he slowly made his way to the elevator. He just stared straight ahead, like he was counting the seconds until he could leave. I didn't ask him if he was okay, because I knew he wasn't. I didn't even ask him what had happened, because something told me I wasn't ready for the answer. We didn't speak again that night. The last thing I remember was watching him leave, his figure disappearing into the darkness of the street. And that was it. No texts, no calls, nothing. He just vanished. I'm still not sure what I encountered that night. Was it just my mind playing tricks on me? Was it something Alex was connected to? Something he had been trying to hide? I don't know. But I can't shake the feeling that whatever followed him that night is still out there. And maybe, just maybe, it's still watching. I met him on Tinder, like you do these days. I wasn't expecting anything crazy. Maybe a casual date, some good conversation, see if we clicked. His profile was pretty standard. A few pics of him with friends at what looked like a barbecue. A pic of him holding a dog, the usual stuff. He had a short bio, nothing strange, just some basic stuff about liking hiking, watching movies, and enjoying good food. Pretty normal. I swiped right, and we started chatting. He was quiet at first, not one of those super engaging or over-the-top flirty guys, which was kind of refreshing. I liked that he seemed down to earth. We made plans to meet at a cute little cafe downtown, the kind of place that's cozy with a little bit of indie charm. When I showed up, he was already there, sitting at a table near the window, looking just like his pictures, normal, a little awkward, but in a good way. He stood up when I walked in, gave me a polite smile, and I was like, okay, cool, this could be fun. We sat down, ordered coffee, and started talking. The conversation was fine at first, a little small talk, the usual what do you do for work, and what do you like to do for fun. He told me he worked in tech, something about software development, and I pretended to know what he was talking about. He asked about my job, and we got into some hobbies, nothing too wild, just casual stuff. But as we talked, I started to notice something. Every time I looked at him, he was smiling. And I don't mean a small smile, I mean a polite smile, like the kind you give someone when you're trying to be polite but don't really know them yet. It was fine at first, but after a while, it felt odd. I wasn't used to someone constantly smiling at me, and not a real smile either, more like he was forcing it. I didn't say anything. I thought maybe it was just his way of being friendly, or maybe he was nervous, I don't know. But the more we talked, the more uncomfortable I felt. Every time I'd glance up at him, his smile was still there, unblinking, just there. It wasn't even a natural smile anymore. It was almost like it was stuck in place, like it never changed. His eyes were still and unmoving, staring at me in a way that made me feel like I was being analyzed, examined. The conversation kept going, but I noticed I was losing track of what we were talking about because I couldn't stop thinking about his smile. Why was it so? Fixed. Why didn't it change? It was starting to feel like he was a mannequin, or one of those weird people on TV who can't stop smiling in a creepy way. I excused myself to go to the bathroom, mostly to break away from the weird vibe I was starting to get. As I stood up, I gave him a polite smile back and walked to the restroom. The whole time I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still watching me, even though I hadn't looked back. When I got to the bathroom, I stood in front of the mirror, staring at myself for a second. I wasn't sure what I was doing, just trying to get my head back in the game, I guess. Then I had this weird thought. I wondered if his smile would still be there when I went back out. Just this random little thought, because I'd been thinking about it for the past few minutes. It was just unsettling. I glanced over my shoulder and looked through the bathroom door, which was cracked open a bit. I couldn't see him clearly, but I could see his shape sitting there at the table. His posture hadn't changed. His body was still, except for his hands, which were resting on the table in front of him. That's when it happened. I saw his lips move. Not in a talking way, but like he was mouthing something. It was weird at first, because I hadn't even heard him speak. The cafe was pretty quiet, and I was still far enough away that I shouldn't have been able to hear anything. I squinted, trying to figure out what he was doing, and then it clicked. He was mouthing my thoughts. Exactly what I was thinking. I couldn't believe it at first, so I stood there frozen, watching him from the bathroom. His lips were moving with precision, as though he was copying my thoughts word for word. The weird part was that I hadn't even spoken them out loud. I hadn't even verbalized the thought I'd had about his smile, but there he was, mouthing it like he knew exactly what I was thinking. I felt my stomach drop. I couldn't look away, even though everything inside me was screaming to run. What the hell was going on? How was he doing that? It was like he was somehow inside my head, mimicking my exact thoughts, like he had some control over me without even saying a word. For a split second, I thought maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe I was overthinking everything. But then his lips continued moving, and it wasn't just one thought. It was a string of things, a series of my inner thoughts, as if he was reading them like an open book, things I hadn't even consciously acknowledged yet. I felt my heart race, and I stepped back from the door, not knowing what to do. What was I supposed to do now? I couldn't go back out there. I didn't even know what to say to him. The guy had some kind of power over me that I couldn't explain. I didn't know how long I stood there in that bathroom, just staring at myself in the mirror, trying to calm my breathing. I debated leaving, but I didn't want to cause a scene or make him angry. What if he'd follow me? What if he already knew what I was thinking about doing? Finally, I took a deep breath, forced myself to step out of the bathroom, and slowly made my way back to the table. I tried to act normal, but everything felt wrong. The air felt heavier, and the smile he was still giving me felt too wide, too permanent. It was like he was waiting for me to say something, or waiting for me to acknowledge what he'd just done. But I couldn't. I didn't even know how to process what was happening. I sat back down, trying to keep my face neutral, but inside I was freaking out. His smile was still there. It hadn't moved an inch, but now it felt like something more, like it wasn't just a smile anymore. It was a mask, a facade that hid something much darker. We continued talking, but I could barely focus on anything he said. My mind was too preoccupied with what I'd just seen. Every time I looked at him, all I could think about was what he was mouthing when I wasn't paying attention. I wondered if he could hear my thoughts all the time, if he was just pretending to be a normal guy. Was this all just some weird game to him? Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I made some excuse about needing to leave, and he didn't protest. He just nodded and gave me that same smile. When I left the cafe, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still watching me. I didn't block him right away. I don't know why I didn't. Maybe I thought I was overreacting. Maybe I thought it was just a weird coincidence. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't seen the last of him. And sure enough, a few hours later, I got a message from him. It was simple. "I'll see you again soon. I know your thoughts." That's when I knew I had to delete my account, but even then, I couldn't shake the feeling. It's been weeks since that date, but every now and then, I'll catch myself thinking something, and I'll feel like someone's listening, like someone's mouthing my exact thoughts back at me from a distance. And every time I feel it, I wonder, is he still out there? Is he still watching me? I don't know, but I do know one thing for sure. Some things are better left unexplored. Some people, they just aren't who they seem. I swear, I thought I was losing my mind. It all started on a regular Sunday afternoon. I'd been having a pretty lazy weekend just hanging out doing nothing. I decided to take a quick nap, maybe an hour or two, just to recharge for the week ahead. I wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary to happen. But when I woke up, I checked my phone. The usual notifications, emails, some random stuff on Instagram, but then I noticed a message from someone on Tinder. It was from a match I'd made a few days earlier. I wasn't super invested, but we'd talked a bit. She seemed nice enough, a little quirky, but nothing that made me think this would turn into something weird. The message was simple enough. She asked, "Are you still coming to dinner?" I stared at my phone, confused. I glanced at the date. It was yesterday's date. I checked it again, and yeah, it was still the same. Yesterday. My first thought was that maybe I'd accidentally slept through the entire day, but I checked the time. It was late, way too late for that to be true. I'd only been napping for a couple of hours max. I shrugged it off, figuring it was just some weird glitch or maybe I was overthinking things. I wasn't going to dwell on it, so I responded, "Yeah, I'm on my way now." Even though I had no idea what dinner she was talking about, I threw on some clothes, grabbed my keys, and drove to the restaurant we'd agreed on. My phone buzzed again as I pulled into the parking lot. Another message from her. "Great, I'll see you soon." The dinner was honestly kind of fun. We got along well, talked a lot about random stuff, and I could tell she was into me. I was into her too. Nothing out of the ordinary happened. We finished our food, walked around a little, had some decent conversation, and then I called it a night. I dropped her off at her place, and she kissed me on the cheek, told me she'd be looking forward to seeing me again. I went home, feeling pretty good about the date. But when I got into bed and checked my phone again, something was off. I had a notification, another message from her. "Are you still coming to dinner?" I froze. The date was today. The date that showed up on my phone was the same one as the previous day. Yesterday, again, the same question. I blinked, wondering if I was losing it. I quickly checked the time. It was late again, like well past midnight. I had just finished a date, but now my phone was telling me it was the same date, the same question. My mind raced. Was this a glitch, or had I somehow just relived the same day over again? I mean, it didn't make sense. I had memories of everything from the date. Everything felt real. But the fact that the phone was showing the same thing, it freaked me out. I responded again, "Yeah, I'll be there," figuring maybe I was just overthinking it. It had been a long day. But this time, I didn't go to sleep. I stayed awake. I had to know if something was off. The next morning, I woke up to the same message. "Are you still coming to dinner?" Same thing as before, yesterday's date. And again, I felt this weird feeling in my stomach. What the hell was going on? I checked the time, and sure enough, I was back at square one. I had just woken up, and the day was the same one I'd lived through the night before. This time, I didn't respond right away. I decided to test it out. I stayed at home. I stayed in bed for a while, just to see if I could break whatever loop I was stuck in. But no matter how long I waited, no matter what I did, the same message kept appearing. "Are you still coming to dinner?" Eventually, I gave in. I had to go. I couldn't not go. It was like I was being pulled into it. The more I resisted, the more it felt like I was being sucked back into the same loop. So, I got up, dressed, and went back to the same restaurant. It wasn't even a big deal anymore. It felt like I'd done it all before. The same conversations, the same moments. The only difference now was that I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living the same night, over and over again. Every morning, the same thing, same dinner, same everything. It didn't even feel real anymore. Days turned into weeks. I didn't tell anyone because honestly I thought I was just losing it. What could I say? "Hey, I'm stuck in a time loop with this Tinder date I don't even really like." Yeah, that would go over well. I tried everything. I didn't reply to her message once. I just left my phone at home. But every time I came back, it was there. That message, "Are you still coming to dinner?" If I ignored it, it just kept coming back. If I went, it felt like I was walking through the same exact day. Every single morning. I couldn't escape. At some point, I started getting really tired of it. I didn't know what was real anymore. Was this all in my head? Was I just dreaming? Or was I being pranked? Some twisted experiment? It felt like the universe was messing with me. The next time I woke up, I thought, maybe this will be the day it's different. I waited, fully expecting the usual message. And it came, just like clockwork. I tried to fight it this time, like really fight it. I didn't even open the app, but somehow I still knew what the message would say. Are you still coming to dinner? I didn't want to go anymore. I didn't want to be part of whatever was happening. But I had no choice. I couldn't stay away. So, once again, I got in my car and went to that damn restaurant. Dinner was the same. She smiled, asked about my day. I responded, the words almost automatic at this point. I could see her trying to be sweet, but I knew something wasn't right. It was just like every other time. And I realized this wasn't going to end. I wasn't going to break out of it. I was stuck. I don't know what happened to me or why I couldn't get out of this endless loop. I wish I could explain it, but I can't. I haven't been able to. Some days I think I'm still living it. Some days I think I'm finally free. But the moment I start questioning it, the message appears. It's always there, waiting for me. Are you still coming to dinner?